For this session, I'm working on Smaugust, which is a dragon drawing challenge for the month of August each year. There doesn't seem to be a super official list, but I found one online that I really liked, and this is for day 3, and the prompt was Arctic. I like challenges like this for a lot of reasons. Partially just because they force me to do a thing. They take away some of the decision making that I need to forge ahead with, and they kind of allow me to do things that I wouldn't normally do. I say allow, but it's really much more of a force. I don't change prompts because I think it's good for me personally to have to figure out how to work with whatever I'm given. So I was given the prompt for this one, which was Arctic. Now, I decided that I wanted to go with something that was kind of chunky. I was thinking in my head that this is like a really big, fat cat. How can I capture that in a draconic way? My mind very swiftly went to a Pokemon, I believe called Avalugg, which is just this giant glacial, slow-moving ice type. And I like that as kind of a portion of the prompt. And I looked into Monster Hunter as well, and there's a big kind of dragon wyvernish creature called Ukanlos, which is again a giant chonky boy that exists in frozen oceans. And so I used those two as some of my ideas for this. Also looking up turtles for a little bit of the preparatory sketching, I was sorting out the idea of maybe this is just like a giant turtle or tortoise. I ended up with a design that's a little bit different. And you can see right off the bat that I made the legs longer than I wanted and was very quickly adjusting that. You don't have to stick with what you thought you were going to stick with. This footage is sped up 2 times, by the way, just so you don't feel like I'm drawing super fast. I am no speed demon when it comes to my drawing. I have a tendency to hesitate slightly in between each mark, taking a moment to judge if the mark that I just made is good or accurate, needs to be adjusted, and figure out what the next mark needs to be. I am toying with the idea, and I mentioned this in a couple of my past sessions, of having a lot more of my work and footage be real time rather than sped up. So let me know what you think about that in the comments below. I would love to hear because, again, this is not really being made for me. It's being made for y'all. So I start off with the legs here, partially because they're the thing that is closest to us, and partially because they're a struggle for me. I know in my mind that I'm not going to struggle too much with the mouth or the face, that the texture of the back and the tail is not going to be very difficult for me. Those are things that I enjoy working with, and I spend a lot more time drawing faces because they're lower stress for me when it comes to creatures. I spend less time drawing limbs because there's lots of considerations that you have to make. You have to understand at least a little bit of the anatomy, the structure, and whatnot underneath. So I tend to start with the things that are hardest for me, or the things that I enjoy the least. Get them out of the way. If you've got a whole bunch of chores floating around in your home, do you find that you work on the stuff that you hate the most first? Because I certainly do. I don't like doing dishes very much, so if I've got a whole bunch of chores floating around, I'm going to do the dishes first because I want that out of the way. I want to get the dishwasher going so that I can hear that subtle whir in the background, which helps with my, white noise needs and also helps with just like something's in progress. So I do like to sketch out the entirety of the body even when I'm using ink. I'm using a brush tip pen here for a couple reasons. One, it allows me to map out the creature, and the variable line width I find makes the drawings more entertaining and more interesting. I found that my drawings, when I just use a 0.1 micron for the entirety of the drawing, that it feels almost artificial in a way. And so using this brush tip pen allows me to get a quality that feels more human. And I really enjoy that aspect of these kinds of drawings. I can't help myself very much here at the beginning, and although I've mapped out a portion of the creature, I still have all these gaps. I just want to dive in and start working on the details because that's really where my joy comes from in these kinds of things. So I am starting to detail some of it just because I'm going to work on the things that I find fun and then bounce back and forth between the things that are a little bit more arduous to me, just like I talked about earlier with the chores. Sorry about the camera focusing a little bit weirdly. I'm not recording in my normal place. This was recorded when I was at my parents' house because we'd been evacuated from wildfires. So the iPhone is what I'm using here, my trusty iPhone, instead of my dedicated camera. I do actually think that there are qualities to recording with the iPhone that are probably better than my traditional setup, but it's a little bit more difficult and it's hard to make sure that the focus is perfect. So thanks for bearing with me. You'll notice that I have a tendency to bounce around while I'm working on an ink drawing like this. There's a couple reasons. The first is pretty simple though. I don't want to smudge things. And so I will move back and forth to make sure that my wrist is not over top of something that's going to get smudged. The other is that I just have trouble focusing on a singular thing for a long period of time. I really admire the artists who are capable of focusing on one thing, draw from like left to right for their whole drawing. That's really admirable. I don't have an attention span that allows me to do that. If I try to do that, I won't want to work on the drawing and finish it, and I'll walk away. So I feel like transferring my attention from different portions of the drawing is probably a better result than me just getting up and walking away from the drawing for a while. This is an Arctic creature, and as I'm working on it, I'm trying to think about how do I get snow and ice to, show that this is a cold weather creature. In addition, we've got fur on it, which I, used to really struggle with, and I certainly wouldn't say that I'm good at it, but I'm much better at it than I used to be. In contrast, the snow on its back, I do not feel good about. I probably could have and should have looked up some examples of how other artists handle snow and ice when it comes to pen and ink. And if this wasn't just one drawing of a month-long batch of drawings, I would have done so. Sometimes I'm better about it anyway. I have a tendency to look up a whole bunch of references usually and get them set before I start working on a thing. But as I mentioned with the fires, things have been a little bit strange these last couple weeks. Now you can see that the camera transitioned and I am actually back at home to finish this. We were able to come home after just a couple days. This is my traditional setup. I have a camera mounted about 24 inches above where I record, and I can zoom in or zoom out, but I can make sure that the focus is on the actual drawing itself and not randomly reallocating itself toward my hand. This drawing is not coming along too poorly. I'm actually okay with where things are with it, which, to be honest, is not always the case. There are a lot of drawings that I work on where for a significant portion of the drawing, I am dissatisfied with the result, dissatisfied with how things are coming out. And honestly, there's a lot of drawings that I finish that I'm still not really happy with how they came out. That's pretty common, and I don't want to make any assumptions, but it certainly seems to me that a lot of the content that I see online doesn't necessarily represent that. And I understand why. I've been really hesitant to upload the couple of sketchbook sessions that I've recorded that have had drawings that I don't like or I don't think are good. I've done it, I think, 2 or 3 times. In fact, I had a Monday video not terribly long ago that was literally about the fact that, I don't like this drawing. I finished this drawing, but I'm going to share it anyway. I don't think that that's a good thing or a necessary thing for you as an artist. The reason that I did it is because I'm not just an artist. I'm an art teacher. I'm trying to mentor people, and I'm trying to also show that this is what being an artist actually looks like. It's not this pristine, every piece turns out correctly veneer that we see online so much. And I totally understand it. I don't feel like most artists on their Instagram or their YouTube channels are being fraudulent or are being, fake with us. They are just showing the stuff that they feel like is going to get them views, is going to represent the higher echelons of their skill. Why would you show the bottom 20% of your work? You don't need to in a lot of senses. The reason that I do sometimes, as much as I dislike doing it, is because it's easy for us as artists to watch all these people that we look up to and see perfect work or really high quality work all the time. And then when we turn around and we work in our own sketchbooks, we work on our own projects and something doesn't turn out well, there's no context for that. We look at these other artists that we look up to and we go, well, they haven't had a swing and a miss ever in the discernible history that I'm able to sort through. And I have a swing and a miss 1 out of 10 times. And so what's wrong with me? Maybe I shouldn't be doing this. Maybe I'm not cut out to be an artist. And that's the reason that I want to talk about these things, that I show art that I'm not particularly satisfied with sometimes, because every artist has that. Now, there are artists that are super proficient and they don't produce art that you and I are going to look at and be dissatisfied with. But I can guarantee you that all of your favorite art YouTubers and professional artists all produce work that they are dissatisfied with sometimes. It's just how this works. Sometimes, they might be capable of going back in and refining it and building it into something that they really enjoy. But I would wager that for pretty much all of them, there are moments where they abandon a drawing after they finish it or halfway through, because they just know, they have that instinct that like, this is not going to live up to my expectations. It's not going to be something I'm going to be happy with. And that's okay. That's an important thing, I think, for art teachers to talk about and to share, art mentors to talk about, because you don't want to give younger artists the impression that every piece is good, decent, or you're proud of it. Now, if you can find a way to work yourself toward being proud of the effort you put in, proud of the fact that you finished a drawing, that's lovely. That's how I try to think about it. If I finish a drawing that I didn't like, I try to go, well, you know what? You pushed through, Zach. And that's a good thing. Like, you finished. And there's always, a positive in completing a task that was laid out before you, whether you laid it out or somebody else laid it out for you. There is a positive notion to that. And if you can hold on to it, fantastic. But I find for myself most of the time, and probably a lot of you, it's just, you have to wrap your head around, that was a failure, or I didn't succeed as much as I wanted to, or I didn't live up to my own expectations, and that's okay. That's going to happen. It doesn't make me a failure. It doesn't make me weird. It doesn't mean I need to abandon art. It just means that today, in this moment, that drawing didn't do what I wanted it to. And that happens. I've talked before about kind of a batting average almost. Back in the day, it was about like 1 out of 4 of my pieces just didn't work and I was dissatisfied with. And as I've continued working forward, that rate kind of increases in a good way, right? I get to like 1 in 5 doesn't work, or 1 in 8 doesn't work. I'd say for my ink drawings right now, it's about 1 in 15 to 1 in 20, which is astounding to a younger version of myself. Now, for oil paintings, I'm still probably at about a 1 in 7, 1 in 8, which is really disheartening when I hit that painting that just doesn't do what I want it to. It doesn't work out. But I should know this. Like, I've been working on artwork for a very long time, and I know consciously that this is a totally natural, normal part of the process, and it still gets me. So if you feel like that sometimes, you feel like not being able to complete the artwork the way that you want it to, and it is a bad thing, and it gets you down, and you feel like you shouldn't beat yourself up, you know that this is normal, but you still feel down about it, just take some solace in the fact that, like, I'm right there with you. And I would imagine most professional artists and art teachers are also there with you. It's just very natural. It's a hard process. It's logical, and it's got its engineering components, and it's also emotive and creative. And I still find, as a fairly unemotional person, that if I have a really long, exhausting, hard day, if putting my daughter to bed is really, really difficult that night, I can't go draw effectively. And when I try to force myself to do it, things don't turn out well and I get really frustrated. So even for me, who's been at this for 20 to 30 years drawing, I still have those moments. There's nothing weird or bad or broken about you if you find that you have them too. So if you sometimes beat yourself up about those things, please stop. Please understand it's just part of the game. It's part of being an artist. And keep making things, keep pushing forward. Because at the end of the day, it's going to be worth it. You're going to have some cool things that you've drawn, some things that you're proud of, some things that you're not. And those things that you're not are really, they're just stepping stones moving towards the things that you can be happy with and you can be proud of. Well, I'm finishing off this drawing here, putting on the last little details. This is my favorite part, when most of the hard work's been done and I can just go in and put in a lot of shading and hatching. And I'm going to finish this off with this giant, like, wrecking ball on the thing's back, which he's got this tiny little tail, so I don't know how he's going to use it, but I think it looks interesting. It almost looks like an egg. That would be kind of interesting too. Like, what if he's literally holding on to an egg and keeping it safe? You never know, and that's, again, part of what makes it fun. Well, as always, thank you for listening. Thank you to patron Who, What, Where, When for your continued support. If you want to help me out at the Patreon, you can check out the link below. We also have a Discord server attached to this channel, just a little community where we can share our work, back each other up, encourage each other, and give some help on what we're working on. There's a link to that below as well. Have a good one, y'all. See you soon.